There are truths so simple, so luminous, that the mind resists them. We are taught that to live is to strive, to wrestle with the days, to carry burdens upon our shoulders as if effort itself were proof of our worth. Yet beneath this long inheritance of struggle, another current flows, a current that whispers of a life where even the heaviest stone becomes light. What if love is not a feeling that comes and goes, but the very medium in which existence breathes? Not the narrow love we barter for affection, but the vastness that holds sky and earth, bird and silence, sorrow and joy alike. When such love rises, it does not demand effort, it does not coerce us to endure. It dissolves the walls we built around ourselves and transforms even hardship into rhythm, like waves dissolving against the shore. Think of the moments when you have forgotten yourself in devotion, whether in caring for another and creating something true, or in being touched by beauty so vast it stole your breath. In those moments, there was no weight in the act. The task remained, but the sense of labor was gone. What carried you was not your well, but a current larger than the self. Love does not make the path shorter, it makes the path weightless. Our modern mind, conditioned to measure and demand, fears such surrender. It whispers that love is fragile, unreliable, impractical. Yet it is the absence of love that makes us brittle. When we are estranged from it, even the smallest chore becomes heavy. A single day feels like a battlefield. The problem was never the work before us, but the empty space within us where love was not allowed to flow. Rumi tells us, where there is love, there is no effort. He does not mean that life becomes free from challenge, but that challenge is transfigured. The mountain remains a mountain, yet when the climber is in love with the ascent, each step becomes music. Effort becomes expression. Silence becomes complete. In love, the endless struggle against time and against the self is abandoned, and what remains is movement without resistance, like a bird carried on the wind. If this is true, then the question arises, how do we recognize this love? How do we allow it to dissolve the hidden burdens we cling to? Perhaps the answer is not in adding more, not in searching further, but in seeing clearly what has always been present, the quiet flame that burns beneath every experience. And so we stand at the threshold of a paradox. Love is effortless, yet to reach it, we must let go of everything that resists. How do we step into that surrender? To surrender, the word itself unsettles the mind. We have been trained to equate surrender with defeat, to imagine it as weakness or resignation. Yet in the realm of love, surrender is not the end of strength but its flowering. It is not collapse but release. It is the recognition that the self which strains, resists, and clings is not the source of life, but only a shadow trying to control the sun. When Rumi tells us that love erases effort, he does not propose a path of laziness. He speaks of a different order of being, one in which the boundary between self and world dissolves, and action flows as naturally as breathing. In such a state, life ceases to feel like an endless contest against time or circumstance. The burdens we carried reveal themselves not as the weight of reality, but as the resistance of a self unwilling to yield. When that resistance softens, even silence becomes complete, and what was once unbearable is transformed into expression. Think of water. It yields to every shape, yet nothing resists it in the end. Rocks have worn away, valleys carved open, not by force, but by patience, by the ceaseless continuity of flow. Love is like this. It does not conquer through violence. It does not demand through control. It moves, and in its movement, it transforms. Those who live in its current are no longer calculating how much is given or how much is received. They are carried as if by a tide that needs no justification. Carl Jung once observed that where love rules, there is no will to power. The psyche, when grasping for control, becomes divided against itself. Every action feels like compulsion. But where love reigns, the inner conflict dissolves. The will no longer stands against life, but is integrated into its larger unfolding. Here lies the secret. It is not that the tasks of life disappear, but that they lose their sting. Cooking, caring, working, even enduring pain, all can be suffused with a radiance when touched by love. The same act that once felt like a burden becomes a form of communion. The question then is not whether we face effort in the outer sense, for life is full of movement, responsibility, and demand. The question is whether these movements are lived from love or from resistance. In resistance, the heart is heavy, the hours are long, and every moment is measured against expectation. In love, time itself loses its grip. There is no longer I must, only this is. The doer vanishes into the doing, and existence flows unbroken. Meister Eckhart spoke of this when he described the soul that acts without why, a love that seeks no reason, no profit, no reward. In that state, action is its own fulfillment, and even suffering becomes transfigured, not romanticized, but absorbed into a larger wholeness when nothing is wasted. What we once avoided as unbearable becomes another note in the great music of being. But to arrive here requires a subtle turning. One cannot force love to appear, for effort itself is the very veil it dissolves. One cannot demand surrender, for the self that demands remains unyielded. It is like trying to push oneself into sleep or forcing a flower to bloom before its season. What is needed is not striving, but a kind of openness, a willingness to allow the current to move, to let go of the clenched fist that insists on control. And so we circle back to the paradox. Effort cannot bring us to the place where effort dissolves. The gate of love does not open by pushing against it, but by ceasing to push at all. The question is, how does one rest in such a state without turning it into another task, another demand of the restless self? Perhaps the key lies not in reaching outward, but in listening inward, to that quiet presence that has always been waiting. Yet to listen requires silence, and silence itself is feared by the mind that survives on noise. Silence. This is where we arrived at the end of the last reflection, the silence feared by the restless mind, yet secretly longed for by the heart. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the unveiling of presence. In that stillness, we begin to notice what has always been here, beneath the turbulence of thought, the quiet current of love that asks for nothing, yet sustains everything. When we rest in this silence, love reveals itself not as something acquired or achieved, but as the very fabric of being. It is not born from effort, nor does it vanish with the passing of moods. It is like the space in which all things appear and disappear, unchanged by the movements it holds. To live in love is not to add something to life, but to strip away the illusions that obscure what was never absent. This is why the weight of existence dissolves in love. Not because life becomes easy, but because the burden was never in the tasks themselves. The burden was in the resistance, in the mind's insistence that things should be other than they are. Love accepts, and in acceptance, effort falls away. The most difficult moments no longer stand as adversaries, but as passages. Even pain, even loss, are transformed into doorways, not into despair, but into a deeper intimacy with what is. It is as if existence itself whispers, "Stop fighting and see." See how every leaf moves with the wind without resistance. See how rivers do not struggle to reach the sea. See how the stars burn without asking to shine. In each of these, there is no effort, only being. And when love flows through us, our lives join that same harmony. Work becomes offering, silence becomes communion, even waiting becomes fullness. And so perhaps the greatest act of love is simply this: to let life be as it is, to cease the endless struggle of control and open instead to wonder, to see the ordinary as extraordinary, to allow even the smallest gesture, the touch of a hand, the breath in the morning, the stillness of night, to become sacred. For nothing is too small for love, and nothing is outside its reach. This is the gift that Rumi points to when he says, "Where there is love, there is no effort." He is not offering a philosophy to be debated, but a truth to be lived. And to live it does not mean striving to become someone else, but relaxing into the one we already are. Love is not a peak to climb, it is the ground on which we stand. It is not a reward for effort, it is the release from effort itself. So the invitation is simple, though not easy: to rest, to trust, to love without why, to let go of the battle against time, against others, against ourselves. For when love is present, even the silence is complete. And in that completeness, life ceases to be heavy, it becomes light. Not because the world has changed, but because we have remembered what we truly are. If these words have stirred something in you, let them ripple outward. Support this space by leaving your appreciation, by joining the circle that grows with every shared silence. Subscribe if you feel called, not as the duty, but as a gesture of love toward the unfolding of these reflections. And now let us fall again into the silence from which all things come.